knife.
See, we working on his brow chopper. We're just in back of the crown chopper.
Chase, don't do that.
All right. Welcome to Waxing the Porpoise podcast. You got your host, Jim G. Baby, along with the usual suspect, Steve.
Hey,
how's it
Jim.
going? Hey.
Good.
How are you, friend?
Good, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. We are here. This is episode 6 now. We're talking about another Ridley Scott film, Black Rain, from 1989. This is obviously a first-time watch for Steve. I've seen this movie a lot of times. I kind of put it up there, maybe not as high as Blade Runner, but I mean, to me, it's got a lot of similarities. Got the Asian influence. It was filmed in Japan. Primarily, it's another film by dark, brooding kind of film with a detective from Ridley Scott. So I like this one a lot. I'm pretty curious to see what's your initial take on this film.
I agree. Definitely better than Blade Runner.
All right, we can start there. Okay.
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit.
Nice.
There were a few parts where I thought it was going to get a little Blade Runner-y with like the super dark aesthetic. You know, there were some rainy parts that I was a little worried it was going to be rainy again.
God.
But no, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I was a little skeptical going in because I can't remember if we talked about this already, but when Jim and I used to work together, he had this stupid poster up next to his desk for, that's my cat, a couple years. So every time I would come over to your desk, I would have to look at this ridiculous ass poster.
Yeah.
And so it just looked really corny and really 80s, but it was just a good, enjoyable movie. I'm sure it got trashed by critics, you know, just because of the type of movie it is, but I liked it quite a bit.
It's actually cool. I was thinking you probably wouldn't, but I was hoping against hope that you would like it. So cool. Was it the Michael Douglas factor that brought it home, or was that the biggest part of it that helped?
I do like Michael Douglas quite a bit, and he was such a raging asshole in this movie from beginning to end. Totally unnecessarily. He wasn't like, you know, a guy who doesn't pull any punches and tells it like it is. Like, he was just such an asshole this entire movie. But, yeah, I mean, kind of like what I was saying about my criticism of Blade Runner, which I don't want to just talk about endlessly. But I felt like that movie was too far on one end of the spectrum of style over substance. But this one I felt like was much more balanced. It didn't go too far, in my opinion, into the, you know, style, aesthetic, whatever. But it was just a good story. Thought the, like, you know, setting and where they chose to shoot was pretty cool and not way over the top like I kind of thought Blade Runner was. And it was driving me nuts the entire movie who the blonde was until I finally looked it up, and then I realized she was from Temple of Doom.
Yeah. She's actually, this is going straight from memory, pretty sure that's Steven Spielberg's wife. And I don't know, are they still married? Do you know?
I'm not sure if they are, but I remember looking her up at some point after watching it to figure out where she was from. When I saw Temple of Doom, it reminded me like, oh yeah, that's, you know, Steven Spielberg's wife, but I didn't check to see if they were still married.
Yeah, I know they were together for a lot of years. Wait, was she actually in Temple of Doom? Oh, okay, she was. I'm getting her mixed up with Kim Cattrall, who was in Big Trouble Little China with Kurt Russell. because that's kind of like a Indiana Jones type movie. So I get them mixed up. They look pretty similar, to be honest. You know, Kim Cattrall is. Dude, Kate Capshaw is a dime piece too. Back here in circa '89, she's a good-looking woman.
I have a thing with curly hair. I just can't stand it.
What?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Get out.
I think she had straight hair at one point in the movie, right? I want to say she did, and I remember thinking, God, she looks so much better with straight hair.
I can't remember. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, she's fine as hell. And it looks like she is still married to Steven Spielberg. How fun.
How fun. Good for those kids.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and speaking to whether it bombed or not, sometimes it's hard to tell with older films, like, what the consensus was or, like, what the buzz about it was during the time if people liked it, because, you know, stuff like that's this old gets rediscovered, like, by a later generation, like myself, and, you know, people of a certain age, and, you know, it becomes a cult classic, or it becomes revered later for whatever reason. I think this is one of those, kind of, but at least from the Rotten Tomatoes, it looks like it's got a 50% from critics and a 55% audience. And the critic consensus is Black Rain has its fair share of Ridley Scott's directorial flair, but its paint-by-numbers story never rises above genre conventions.
Somebody is going to take that thing and stuff it right up your ass.
I think that's kind of a milquetoast take, but...
I mean, because I liked it, that made me sort of think that it was just going to get trashed for being like a mindless, you know, action, kicking the shit out of people movie, which is why I liked it, so I just assumed.
I think it's got a little bit more nuance than that, too, but it definitely has that in spades. I mean, there's quite a few chase scenes and shootouts, but there's also some intrigue, and I feel like the plot is fairly complex. Like, it's got a lot of moving parts, a lot of different players, and like
it was a good story. I think whatever that critic said about paint by numbers, I feel like that's a little unfair.
Yeah, that's kind of a lazy critique. I think that too is like, that could be like an algorithmic, like, consolidation of a bunch of critic critiques, and so maybe it just spits that out on Rotten Tomatoes. But I tend to trend more with the IMDb review, and this says a 6.6 on IMDb. Personally,
that seems low.
Yeah,
seems low to me.
If I were going on a 10-point scale, I'd probably put this would be like a strong 7. I'd put this at like a 7.6, maybe up to like 8.2, but
yeah, strong C, weak B. Yeah, I could deal with that. There was only one part of the movie where I like pulled back and was like, this is weird and it doesn't match the rest of the movie. Can you guess which part I'm thinking of? There was just one part that didn't seem to fit, you know, one of these things is not like the other. It was the part where Andy Garcia gets up and does karaoke.
Oh, yeah. They're trying to...
That was...
Yeah.
That was so weird.
Mats! Yeah, they're trying... Yeah. It seemed like they were trying to add a little bit of, like levity, because it's a pretty brooding kind of film. There's not a lot of comedic breaks or... Yeah.
Well, maybe he dies shortly after that, so I thought maybe in hindsight they were trying to maybe quickly get you more emotionally connected to him before he dies, so it had more impact. But
yeah, I can see that too. I'm trying to like endear you to him a little bit more, because as much as like I love Andy Garcia, I think this is probably one of his more forgettable roles.
He seems like super goofy. Like, I don't know. Yeah. He seems like coked up through, you know, the beginning of it.
Yeah. Like, he's talking about shoes and shit, and he's like, ladies of the 80s are going for shoes. And, like, yeah, he's like this kind of, like, streetwise, like, kind of player. Like, he's like the younger, more, he's got more vitality. He's like, maybe they were using him as like a contrast to like Nick being this Michael Douglas's character being kind of broken and hamstrung by being divorced, and like he's going through this shit, with the internal affairs investigation. I don't know. That's kind of my take, like the grizzled vet, but it shows that like he's kind of hip too, because he pals around with this younger hell on wheels kind of upstart other detective in Andy Garcia. But I didn't really buy their friendship. I don't know, but I just think that like given like if you look at Andy Garcia's body of work, this is probably one of his like lesser films, but it carries me through enough because I'm a big Andy Garcia fan too. It just in general, so I was just happy to see him in this film. But yeah, like I think his death scene's seemed a little corny. Him getting his head chopped off, but
right. And because I haven't seen a ton of movies, I can't really think of him in a lot of other stuff off the top of my head. I mean, the first thing I think of is Ocean's 11, and he's just, obviously that's made 15, 20 years later, so he's just a different actor at that point.
I think his prime was everything pre the year 2000, and then beyond that, he's kind of relegated to like, Ocean's 11, he's like a regular, generic, anyone could stand in for the like villain of that film, or he's like the foil in that film. But he's in a lot of good stuff. I think his prime is like the 90s. He's in there's a rare gem called Jennifer 8 starring Andy Garcia that he plays the lead in opposite Uma Thurman and Lance Henriksen. That's actually one I'd like to watch or cover one of these days for this podcast. That's just a good film. John Malkovich has a bit role in it at the end, and he plays like a hard ass like internal affairs guy, and him the verbal sparring between him and Andy Garcia is pretty awesome. But he's also in one of our former coworkers, Matt, used to love Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. It's kind of an obscure film too, but it's got like Christopher Walken, Andy Garcia's the lead. Who else is in it? Treat Williams, William Forsythe, Christopher Lloyd. It's kind of like a Pack of Strays, like Bad News Bears group of like thugs that are set up like from Jump Street to like go pull off this heist when they're going to be like, when they're set up to be the patsy right out of the gate. But he was in another film too called Steal Big, Steal Little, where he plays twins in that film. Those three kind of stand out to me for him. But yeah, I don't think he's utilized very well, but in Black Rain. But
put him on the list of movies I haven't seen to watch.
Yeah, I think we just hit like 3 or 4 lightning round that you haven't seen. Okay, so we went over the audience score. So yeah, I think so. We're both, our consensus is this is better than it's given credit for, kind of film. Yeah,
I mean, like I've said before, and I'll say again a million times, like I'm not a real movie person, so my criticism is just based on like, did I like it or not? Not, oh, it was a good, well-made film. So that being said, yeah, I enjoyed it. Right on. Cool. There was that funny, I think it's one of the first scenes where he does that motorcycle race. Yeah. Under the bridge, which was a fun little corny intro. But then for the next hour and 48 minutes, there wasn't really any more reference to him on a motorcycle. Yeah. So the whole time I was thinking, okay, this has got to come back at some point. Otherwise, why would they put this random scene in the beginning? Yeah. And then when he's chasing the guy and he comes up on those 2 motorcycles, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they bring it back. Yeah, dude, that yeah, that part's awesome. All right, so I guess too. I want to run through real quick who our main cast of characters is in this film. So good luck with all the pronunciations. I think I got a couple of them down. I'm not going to do everyone, that's for sure, because then I'll get into trouble. But yeah, so this is a 1989 film directed by Ridley Scott.
we're probably going to see a couple more of these on this podcast from him. He's like one of my favorite directors of all time. So, stars Michael Douglas as Detective Nick Conklin, Andy Garcia, as we already talked about, as his partner, Charlie Vincent. Kate Capshaw, Steven Spielberg's wife, has a bit role as like the exposition dump character. And then
What does that mean?
Exposition, so like the person or the device, it can be a person or like a thing in a movie that has expository information like within the film, like it's like it's leaning in and winking at the audience, like this is what's going on. Like they use Kate Capshaw to, describe to Nick, who is like, we're watching the movie pretty much through Nick's eyes, Michael Douglas, about the background of like, the Yakuza, the two subsets, the two families that are at war, just kind of breaking down like, he's a stranger in a strange land and so are we. And she's like explaining, the plot basically, like what's going on to the audience. That's like people call them like an info dump, or like, exposition too can be in like, in sci-fi movies, they'll have like a little, it's not quite like a montage, but they might go through, something through a computer, or they'll show like something explaining like where we're at in the story. And
so it's something that kind of like moves the story along.
Right. Okay. And I think, a lot of people will say like the best
helps explain it.
Right. And like, I guess the best uses of that, it's like less is more kind of thing. And if you can weave it into the story without having, your token expository character just come in and be like, explaining everything, and then you don't see him again. I don't think they're, with her character, because she kind of comes in and out throughout the story a little bit, and it seems like it's kind of setting up like a love interest type character for Michael Douglas too, but I think more so it's just like a friend, another American in the story, because it's all set, it's like fish out of water, stranger in a strange land kind of thing. He's trying to navigate like the customs and like, just the whole ball game there is different than him being a detective in New York. So I think they could have done worse and they could have done better. It's fine, her character, but I think the dark horse actor in this film that I really like, well, I guess it's two. It's the Japanese foils. So Ken Takakura, who plays Masahiro Mats, like their kind of their handler in Japan, that's part of their police force. And then the dude who played Sato, I'll probably butcher his name, but it's Yusaku Matsuda. He's pretty badass. He's a pretty cold villain. Like I think he has that down.
I thought both of those guys did a really good job.
Yeah. The guy who played Mats, Ken Takakura, he's actually known in Japan as like the Clint Eastwood of Japanese film. Only like if Clint Eastwood were like more of a villain, more of an anti-hero. He's been in like, if you look at his filmography, he's been in a shit ton of movies. I guess he did like 180 films between like 1962 and like 1978 in Japan. He hasn't been in very many American films. I think there's only like 3 or 4, and all of them are kind of to the level of Blade Runner. There's one called The Yakuza that he was in like 1974, directed by Sidney Pollack, that was kind of his breakout to American cinema. But then he went back and he just did a shit more ton Japanese films. So he's kind of a rare, he seems more familiar, like he seems more comfortable in front of like, an American audience, like an American film, which is why I thought I had recognized him in something else, but he really hasn't been in a lot of American cinema. But he normally played like the Yakuza boss. He played like a badass, like, no qualms about putting a bullet in someone's head and like being that character. Whereas in this character, I mean, he's really like gentle, kind of like, full of honor and like tradition and very by the book. And I like how, but he also, I feel like he operates in a gray area too. Like he's more willing to meet Michael Douglas's character and, you know, go just beyond the rank and file, because that's how this story comes to its conclusion, you know?
I think he gets there as the story goes on.
Yeah.
You know, early on he seemed kind of hesitant and just sort of, I'm going to do everything by the book, and kind of sensitive. And then by the end, you can tell he's like coming around to more of the Michael Douglas school of ass kickery.
Yeah.
And maybe you thought you recognized him, or he seemed really comfortable. Like, his English was really good, so it's surprising that he didn't do a bunch of American movies.
Yeah, I was shocked. I was like, I could have sworn he was in more, but when I did a cursory bit of research, I looked him up, and I was shocked that he hasn't been in more. But it is kind of cool that he's playing very hard against type in this film, and I think he knocks it out of the park too. So so that's the main cast of characters in here. There's another guy, I'm sure, or actually I'm not sure, but do you recall at the very beginning, towards the beginning of the film, when Michael Douglas is getting brazed by Internal Affairs for his side story thing?
I already know where you're going with this. Yep.
The main fat guy, walrus mustache, from
Jump to conclusions, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty young buck in this film too. What's his name? Richard Reel.
He does look much younger, but also exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because Office Space was probably...
That was 96, I think.
Okay, so I mean... It was,
or maybe 98.
I was thinking it was only about 10 years earlier.
You know, I might be butchering that. Let me see when Office
It might have
Space
been
came
like
out.
02 or 03 or something.
Oh, it's 99. Damn.
Oh, all right.
So it's 10 years older.
Around it.
Yeah. I have people skills. Yeah, every time I see that part, I'm waiting for him to like say that. But and then the other guy, the other Internal Affairs guy, do you recognize him?
I don't think I did.
Patches or no. I'm confusing with Rip Torn. No, it's Stephen Root. He was he was also in Dodgeball. He played the cuck to that his Asian wife. The dude who was like the workout freak. He's like, yeah, I'm going to be back here. I'm going to be working on my delts. And he was in Office Space too. He was Milton, my stapler.
So wait, in Dodgeball, the guy who's reading Obscure Sports Quarterly?
Yes, the Ocho.
When she does the L, like, loser forehead thing, he's like, L for love.
Yeah.
Wait,
that's him.
That's the same guy as Milton in Office Space?
Yeah, Milton Wadhams.
Are you sure?
We fixed the glitch. Dude, watch Stephen Root. Dude, he's a chameleon, man. He's a great actor. He's been in a ton of shit. Yeah, he was Milton. He played...
Yeah,
before that, he was like the head honcho of News Radio that like ran The Office and News Radio. That's a pretty deep cut. Yeah, he's old.
Wow,
he's
good for him.
70 years old.
I've seen both of those so many times and never made that connection.
Yeah. So, yeah, I thought that was a fun seeing those two fellas. I like the side plot, too, that kind of, like, right out of the gate, it paints Michael Douglas as, like, he operates in the gray. He's not good completely. He overachieves to, like, offset, like, the little bit of bad that he dabbles in, because he's clearly skimming off the top to justify, like, being divorced and having a upkeep with kids and all that kind of shit. So he's just doing what he can to get by. And that's like the main...
He strikes me as just like a piece of shit that you root for, though. I love the part eventually when he's like, did I steal? I mean, yeah, I stole. Like, this whole time he had been, fighting against all these accusations and getting mad at the Internal Affairs people. And then later on, he's like, well, yeah, I mean, I stole. Yeah. And then when he steals the plates and gives them to that guy at the very end, like, yep, there he is.
Yeah.
Chase, don't do that.
It's just like one more kind of less than dignified act. I
thought that was dignified because he's showing like, I'm still a good guy at the end of the day. Like, see, I could have jacked these and I could have come up on this.
I kind of thought when Most gave him the gift that the plates were going to be in there. Which, because Michael Douglas is going home, he still doesn't make enough money, for his kids.
Right.
And everything. So when he gives him that gift and he's like, oh, it's for your kids, my thought was, oh shit, he's giving him both those plates so that he can go home. I mean, it's well established that he's willing to steal money from scumbags. So
right.
It doesn't seem like too far of a leap for him to just counterfeit enough money to be able to take care of his family.
Right.
But nope, then he ended up giving it to the other guy, which I don't know how valuable U.S. currency is to a man living in Japan, but maybe he can resell them or do something.
Well, isn't that the whole plot of the movie, that they're trying to get that other half of the plate so they can counterfeit it? They can make money off that. Like, they can...
Well, the mob can, but
right.
A guy who's kind of on the straight and narrow as a police officer...
Well, no, so he was giving that back, like, hey, turn this in to, like, the Japanese cops. Like, see, I'm actually, deep down, I'm a good guy. I'm giving this back to you. Like, that's the way I took it.
I just interpret it as, like, because if he really wanted to... I don't know. In my mind, if he really wanted to just turn them over to the authorities, he could have done that when there were cops crawling over that house. But the fact that he took them, maybe he was thinking about taking it home for his own use, and then at the last minute changed his mind and was like, "Here you go."
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I think it's a thing between Motz and Michael Douglas. Like even after everything they all went through, he probably feels like Motz still thinks at the end of the day he's got a sliver of, like, you're a piece of shit. And I think that gesture at the end when he gives the plates back to Moss, like, he wanted that to be their parting shot. Like, see, like, I have your back, you have mine, you can trust me. This is my last honorable act, I guess. Because then he's got to go back with his tail between his legs back to the States. I think his hope in this entire film too was, obviously he had a hard-on to bring this Sato guy to justice, because he's using that as, like, leverage or a bargaining chip for when he comes back, because he's still got to face the internal affairs. That's not just going away. So that was like he was chomping at the bit to get this case taken care of as, like, another bargaining chip. But then I think it morphs to, like, then it becomes an honor thing after Charlie dies, because he feels responsible, because he is, at the end of the day, responsible for his partner dying. So maybe it's a little bit of both, but I think that's what the film is trying to get across, like, showing his change from a character of thinking about himself and what he can do to get by and get off to, like, becoming a man of honor, as corny as that sounds, but that's what I think they're going for.
I agree, because at first, it's a pride thing. Like, it's his arrest. He wants to make sure it goes the way it's supposed to, because, like you said, he's already in some hot water, so making that big of an arrest will look good for him. And then to lose the guy, now he wants to get him back for his own reputation, and then add his partner getting killed on top of that. It just ratchets it up to, like, a third level of why he so badly wants to get it done. Because at one point would you just be like, I'm just getting on a plane and going back to the States, you guys can figure it out? Because it seemed like such a corrupt, unwinnable situation. But the pride of getting credit for the arrest, plus not getting humiliated plus vengeance for your partner. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I can totally see why he wouldn't leave with all of those things happening, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, when he goes over there and he loses him, that's kind of when the movie logic takes full effect. It jumps the shark, because it's like, if that happened, dude, the Japanese police ain't gonna fucking help you, one American detective in like a city of 15 million people, and there's this like massive Yakuza ongoing war that's been raging for a while at least. And yeah, there's so many players. It's like, yeah, you get on a fucking plane and that's the end of the story. So otherwise this wouldn't be a movie, but it is. So
right. Well, do you remember when they tag along on that raid, and they just like jump in the back of the van, like, we're just observers, we're just here observing.
Yeah.
and then they get to the scene of the hideout or whatever, and then when they bust in, the American guys come in, like the Japanese cops all sort of stand back a little bit and defer to them. It's like, okay, that would never happen, but
fuck no.
It's okay. Yeah, it wasn't.
The man up.
I don't know. What was that?
Oh, what's his face? Gonna have to man up.
You have to man up.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, I should have put the whole thing in there. That's when he's like, "You playing man's football now. Gonna have to man up."
Because he asked him like where he went to college, right? He's like,
no, he went to Missouri, and he's like, yeah, you're not gonna be able to get away with doing that. That's small time. You could get away with that in Missouri, but now we're playing man's football. Gonna have to man up.
Do you want to maybe explain that for the listeners who are extremely lost, having heard a few of those clips in the last couple weeks?
Yeah, what is his name? I think his name is Jonathan Harris.
So while you look that up, a little bit of background for those folks listening. This is from a 10 to 13-year-old season of Hard Knocks, right? Where they're in Cincinnati, and this guy is what, like a tight end coach or like an O-line coach?
Yeah, he's tight end coach Jonathan Hayes.
And he's watching film with one of their young recruits named Chase. Who cares what his last name is?
Chase Kaufman from Missouri. He was their draft pick in 2008.
They're watching film of Chase, basically not knowing how to do anything right. So these little drops you keep hearing are a coach at the end of his rope with a player who doesn't know what he's doing. And Jim has a weird Asperger-like obsession with this clip. And it took him so long to find it that now he's just going to beat it to death. So,
Chase, what the fuck were you thinking about?
Exactly. Yeah, perfect example. That's such a good one.
Yeah, that's got to be my favorite. But
Do you have any moves? I'd like to see you incorporate them.
yeah, he's just such a fucking condescending prick to this rookie fucking tight end. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's not going away anytime soon.
That last one I think is my favorite, where he's like, "You got any moves?"
Yeah,
I think he's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Well, I'd like to see you incorporate them."
Yeah,
I mean, he's giving him definitely tough love, you know.
Yeah, and I a little background on that too. I guess Jonathan Hayes, he played football with the Kansas City Chiefs with Chase Kaufman's dad, Dave Kaufman. So he's been a family friend his whole life. So he gives him a little bit extra shit because he wants him to like rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
Which he never does.
That's like when you see a coach whose kid is on the team and they go even harder on their kid.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
that's
totally.
Right.
Chase, don't do that.
Yeah, and every time he fucks up while they're watching film, he makes them do 10, 15 push-ups. So, like, there's, like, a montage of him, like, saying, like, what the fuck? And then he's, like, 15 push-ups. And so he does push-ups, like, fuck, in that one episode, like, 30 times. It shows him just banging out, like, 10, 15 push-ups during their film session. But, yeah.
Needless to say, his career didn't last very long, right?
No, yeah, I think he bounced around the league for like 3 or 4 years. Got signed. The last team he was on the practice squad. Now he sells real estate, I think. I swear, dude, every ex-NFL player, it's either you're in the booth, real estate, or they're a financial advisor. Or they work with the team, like as a coach. But, okay.
I could see a strong correlation between elite athlete and sales in one way or another, right? You have to be good with people. You have to be able to read the person that you're talking to. You can't just be totally socially unaware. And you also have to have a certain level of confidence. I don't think most people make it to a high level of sports with, low self-esteem.
Right. Yeah. They're usually...
So I could totally see that.
Yeah. Charismatic, and I mean, most of them, it seems like they have some kind of financial acumen, but all right. So I guess at this point, we don't really have to go through all the plot and everything. I mean, this is pretty complex kind of plot with Black Rain. There's Michael Douglas's side story with the internal affairs, and then he just happens to be, depending on the way you look at it, right place, right time to see like a Japanese Yakuza coming over to the U.S. and he murders a dude in front of like 50 people in an Italian eatery. He kills
2 guys.
Well, he killed... Okay, right. So he kills 2 guys in front of, like, in broad daylight, in front of, like, 50 people. So enter Andy Garcia and Michael Douglas. They capture him. They get him. They extradite him to Japan and promptly lose him by being served papers in Japanese from someone standing in as the Japanese police department when they're just inside guys, part of the Yakuza that our main villain, Sato, is in cahoots with, and then so they lose him again. And then the rest of the movie is just him on a wild goose chase, trying to, like, fish out of water, trying to get his bearings, find a friend, a lifeline, try to get himself in with Mats, the handler of the Japanese police that's tasked with kind of holding his hand. And those two, they kind of... They play off each other pretty well, and Mats finally kind of can see where Michael Douglas is coming from, not always being like the company man and, operating in on the periphery to get things done, maybe not by the book, and then it culminates with them finally bringing Sato to justice. And I like that there's not like a happy ending. There's not like a lot of resolution, like... Because at that point, it's about just finally getting the damn thing done and bringing Sato to justice. You don't really give a shit what Michael Douglas is coming back to in the States. But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's distilled down to a pretty fine point. But I had a question. I was wondering, what do you think is my favorite part of this film?
Let's see.
I'll give you a hint. It's a little bit more comedic than the last time I posed this question at Thunderheart. It's a comedic moment.
Is it when they're on the plane back to Japan and he's staring at him and he's like, "What the fuck are you looking at?" And then he like punches him in the face?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I love that part. Because you notice, I don't know if you picked up on it, so Michael Douglas they're sitting on the plane extraditing the main villain Sato back to Japan, and this is back in it was wild. This is back in the days when you could smoke cigarettes on the plane. So Michael Douglas is just banging heaters, and he's playing solitaire, like old school analog solitaire, with actual cards, and he cheats in solitaire, and the villain Sato notices it, picks up on it, and he looks down, notices he's cheating, and then he looks over at Michael Douglas and gives him kind of this like shit-eating little grimace.
I did not pick up on that.
Yeah, and then that's when Michael Douglas says, "What the fuck are you looking at?" or whatever. And then he pretends to like stretch and lean back, and he fucking just elbows him. He chicken wings him super hard in the face. And then Andy Garcia comes back. Yeah, he's like, "What's
like,
going on?"
He must have bit his lip or something.
Yeah, and I like too. He calls everyone babe when he's being like,
oh my god,
that passive aggressive, like condescending dick. He's like, "You okay, babe?"
that got pretty tiresome pretty early for me, actually, because they were just pushing it like every 5 seconds. If I could rewatch it, I would want a counter for how many times they said babe and how many cigs they were smoking, because it was just relentless.
Yeah, especially when they go to that karaoke bar. Just every one of their moms just smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, imagine being on like a 20-hour flight or whatever it is, and people are just ripping butts the whole time. That sounds awful. I just got off a plane from California, and I was thinking about that, because now I get this weird like vertigo kind of... I don't know if it's vertigo, but like I get this weird nausea right when you take off and you get up to fucking cruising altitude. Between the point of like taking off and before you get to like 32,000 feet or whatever, I get this weird fucking queasiness, like car sickness kind of feeling. And then it stabilizes. But I could only imagine, dude, if there were like 20, 30 people in my general area fucking smoking cigarettes, dude, I'd throw up so much. It's fucking unreal. Yeah, I don't know how people dealt with that. Same thing like when you hear about like people back in the 60s and 70s, they go on like long family vacations and their parents are fucking just up front smoking cigarettes with the windows rolled up and shit. Like, fuck that. Or if a restaurant has a smoking section, the entire restaurant is the smoking section.
That's one of the things I really don't like about casinos. Like, normally they're a good time, but that fucking smell that's like locked into like the machines themselves and the carpet and everything, it reminds me of being a smoker and not being able to smell it, but then being pulled out of it and not smoking cigarettes for like 10 years. It's just like so pervasive.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's gross. I mean, that's been one of the best things about COVID as it relates to casinos, is a lot of them went on smoking. If not throughout the entire casino, they cut down on different areas where you could smoke, which, yeah, it's a nightmare. And I mean, that's something we can get into in a later episode. The reason why I spend more time than most in casinos, but the smoking is unreal. And I don't know what the stats are, but let's just pretend the U.S. population is, let's be generous and say 10% smokers, even though I doubt it's anywhere near that high. Mm-hmm. The percentage of casino patrons that are smokers has got to be like 40. It's unreal. I think there's just there's a correlation between scumbag, degenerate gamblers, no offense, and smokers. Like, there's it's a Venn diagram with a big overlap. You know? Yeah,
totally. Yeah. Yeah, this day and age, you don't really notice a lot of people out in, like, the general public who smoke. No. But, yeah, it becomes concentrated when you go to a casino for sure. Except out in the Midwest, I've noticed there's a lot of smokers out here.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
It's still a big thing. But we got low gas prices, so fuck it.
Yeah.
I think out here it just eclipsed like $4.89, and people are out here about to riot in the fucking streets. I was like, I just saw a buddy post something that's like $6.89 in San Diego right now.
Unreal.
Yeah, even when I went back to California this past week, I was seeing in Corning, I was seeing like $6.15. I was like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah. Don't worry though, it should get better soon. No, it won't.
I guess. Oh, do you know interesting part that has some historical context? When, you know, the other main Yakuza, like the old dog, Sugai, when he's talking about the Black Rain, which is where the movie takes its namesake from. Little piece of historical significance of Black Rain. So on August 6th and 9th of 1945 during World War II, when the U.S. dropped the atomic bombs on 2 Japanese cities, the first of which was Hiroshima on August 6th, which was a major Japanese shipping port, and then the second bomb dropped 3 days later on Nagasaki. Emperor Hirohito refused to surrender following the devastation. Hirohito finally ordered his country to surrender, ending the United States war with Japan. So Sugai's involvement in these chain of events, the fictionalized account, is that he lived in one of these cities. The city isn't revealed whether it was Hiroshima or Nagasaki, but as a boy when he was there, and when the bomb was dropped, he states, "I was 10 years old when the B-29 came. We were underground for 3 days. When we came up, the city was gone. Then the heat brought rain. Black rain." So Sugai's suggesting that the pollution from the atomic fallout had somehow turned the rain black. He goes on to say that following the war, American values were forced onto his people by the United States, who had agreed to aid in the rebuilding of Japanese society due to the destruction.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Due to the destruction caused not only by the atomic bombings, but also from many other non-atomic bombings of other Japanese cities during the war in the Pacific. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. And then Sugai also goes on to say this policy of greed over honor created young gangsters like Sato. Like he's trying to graft that onto, that's why this new generation of greed over honor is distilled in the form of Sato, who's more violent, reckless, power hungry, money hungry. And the war between Sato and Sugai on the Japanese side that, Michael Douglas is the outsider looking in on. Sato wants his own territory to rule over, and it involves seizing, obviously, the territory from Sugai, who is also his boss. But so, that goes back to, Sugai's plan is to flood the American economy with counterfeit money and reap the benefits. So trying to, that's his revenge at getting back. So that's the significance of what they would have done, had everything gone their way, and that was the main struggle for the counterfeiting to begin with. Whereas Sato just wanted to do it to get fucking rich, and the greed factor, greed over honor. So I thought that was kind of an interesting context too. And then one thing too, I didn't mention how he was talking about. This is kind of veering away from the movie, but I think it's worth talking about. When he talks about, aside from the horrific nature of the atomic bombs, and everyone knows about those, how incredibly devastating those were, but the non-atomic attacks that preceded the atomic bomb drops, which were the fire bombings of dozens and dozens of Japanese cities. I think this gets lost on a lot of Americans too. And I want to preface it too, I'm not saying, American guilt, or I'm not pushing an agenda here, but when I learned about this, I was kind of taken aback. I didn't realize even taking the destruction caused by the atomic bombs, the fire bombings that preceded us dropping those atomic bombs ostensibly to end the war, which I have opinions about too, but the fire bombings that preceded that were fucking insane, and not a lot of people know about it. Do you know what I'm talking about? How many hundreds of thousands of people were burned the fuck alive, and how many cities were just completely wiped out even before we amped up to the atomic level.
Yeah, I think that's when they first invented napalm, because they would drop it and it would just burn everything it came in contact with. And most of their houses were made of not straw, but paper material. It may as well have just been kindling, right? I don't know if you're familiar with, or if you've read Malcolm Gladwell. He's got a book. It's called The Bomber Mafia, I think. It's really interesting. It's a good book. Recommended if you care. it sort of boils down to, God, I'm going to butcher it, because a lot of it has to do with the bombing in World War II of Japan, and like different philosophies of, is it better to just like bomb the shit out of an entire city and just get them to give up like by attrition, or is it better to bomb like strategic, smaller sites that just cripple their ability to, like let's say if they're building planes or whatever, if you can bomb the place that makes all the propellers, well, now they don't have planes and you don't have to bomb an entire city. You can just take out that one strategic thing. It talked about it in Germany and Japan, but
right.
It's an interesting book, but it talks about, I can't remember exactly what it was, but one of the generals, because there was a disagreement between like two main generals on how to take Japan, and the one who decided to use the atomic bomb, I believe, was actually given, this is going to sound crazy, but I can double check it later. He was given like an award or an honor from Japanese like emperor at the time, because he's like, we would not have given up a ground war, and we both would have lost like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of troops before the inevitable surrender happened, because they were just, outgunned. So in a weird, ironic twist of fate, he was like, thanks for doing that, because it saved us both a lot of lives. But
that's so fucking warped. Like, just thinking about that, like, that's wild. Off air, I'd be curious to see that, because I actually wrote a paper in college about that, about like being against using the atomic bombs in Japan as a means of ending the war in the Pacific. And
why do you hate this country?
No, I won't get into it, but like, like the standard party line is like, we did it to be by killing, vaporizing hundreds of thousands of Japanese men, women, and children instantly. It saved, like, it's thrown around like another 5, 6, 7, 8 million Americans and Japanese who would have died if we would have kept going like traditional warfare avenue.
Yeah.
But the research I did, like it looked like that the emperor was close to some sort of like appeasement or some sort of compromise, because too, the Russians were coming in on the backside too. I read a good book where a guy was talking about, it wasn't as clear cut, and his overarching theory was it was more of a display of power and dominance, like by using the atomic bombs to Russia, like saying, hey, look what we have, kind of waving our finger, behave. But anyway, that's going down a huge tangent that's not related to this movie. But yeah, I thought that the part about the Black Rain was significant and interesting to talk about, because that's what this fucking film is called. But
and it's weird if you think about, because the movie, the movie was, I don't know, 30 years ago, 33 or whatever. So it was only
40 years.
40, like 45 years. So, the movie doesn't seem that old, and it's 30 plus years. So at that time, the atomic bombs had only been dropped 30, 40 years prior to that, which probably didn't seem like that long to them, So to us, it's like, wow, that was, 80 years ago, but...
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that wild to think about? Like, what if the roles were reversed, and then like a Japanese film company was coming in and making a film called like Green Fire or something, Or okay,
yeah.
But yeah, it was only 30 years apart, Like that's weird to think about. But I guess that's a good dovetail into this. So I guess talking about like the filming and production of Black Rain, I guess Ridley Scott had a ton of difficulties, kind of similar to the difficulties he had working on Blade Runner with an all-British crew. Is he had I guess filming an American film, maybe they're more stringent, but filming this film in Japan, he wanted to film, like the studio was against it, But Ridley Scott, he's like a perfectionist and he wants like authenticity and yada, yada, yada. He pushed like, no, I want to make this fucking thing in Japan. But all the red tape involved with like getting permits and like, you know, the certain times a day that you could film, it was like extremely hard. So like they'd have these long setups. So like normally where under normal circumstances they could film for like, you know, 7 or 8 hours, but that would equate to like, you know, 16 or 20 hours worth total, including like prep before and cleanup after. In Japan, they could only eke out like 2 to 3 hours of actual filming time, but they had the same, if not more, amount of prep work that they had to do to sites, and then tear everything down and make it like nothing. There was no semblance of a film crew or anything here the next day, just to then have to rebuild it all again, sets, getting all the shots, the cameras set up and everything, just to eke out, you know, another 2 hours worth of actual filming. So like the production was distended, a lot of money burnt filming. So, and that dovetails too. So the end scene in that last motorcycle chase of Michael Douglas and Saito in that vineyard, that was actually filmed in Napa Valley, California, because at that point,
oh, no kidding?
Yeah, they had almost run out of money. So that's when Ridley Scott had to turn tail and be like, okay, yeah, we got to finish this in California, because of all the constraints and the difficulties involved with, you know, a major, you know, I don't know if you call this a blockbuster, but this is a major film production, you know. So they had to film. So all of that, like the last maybe quarter of the film, I guess, was filmed at Silverado Country Club in Napa Valley, California.
Silverado? Oh, I think I know where that is.
Yeah, I've never been, but I mean, obviously the beginning of the film takes place in New York, so they filmed all that shit in New York. Some of the sets and stuff, it was filmed in L.A. But yeah, like in Manhattan, Queens, and then they filmed the rest of it in sequence. So like the third to the like 3/4 mark of the film, all that was filmed in Osaka, Japan. And then they had to come back and film the rest of that in Napa. Fun fact.
That's funny. I wasn't sure if it was like maybe a stylistic choice, but it seemed like the last maybe quarter of the movie, like it wasn't as dark visually. It seemed to get a little brighter. It seems like something that they would do intentionally, but maybe not.
Yeah, that could have just been like the constraints that they were dealing with at that vineyard too. But yeah, you can definitely tell like there's a little bit of a difference. I don't know if I would say it was a stark contrast, but I'm sure
maybe they just didn't have enough money to put it through the gloom and doom filter like the rest of the movie. Yeah, because it is very Blade Runner-ish in the, and I think that's what he was going for with like the Asian aesthetic in Blade Runner too, trying to bring that to 2019's Los Angeles. Maybe redeem himself. Yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else about like the plot or anything involved that we haven't discussed thus far about Black Rain that you want to touch on? I don't think so. I mean, like you said, it's not. It's it's complex, but it's not overly complicated. I didn't think they belabored anything about it. I just thought it was like a pretty straightforward, cool story. I would recommend it if anybody hasn't seen it and has a desire to see it after listening to us talk about it for the last hour. Yeah. I mean, I like it a lot too. I'd never sit here and try to pick it apart because it's got a sentimental value for me, and I just think it's a good film. But if I were getting nitpicky, I think that the total runtime could come down a little bit because it does kind of... I agree. It is a slog in some parts. It drags a little, but I think, for me anyway, it wraps up... it's like they say about telling a good joke, the punchline has to it has to justify the build-up, you know?
Right.
So there were definitely points throughout the movie where I was checking the clock, like, come on, God, this is longer than it needs to be. But I felt like it wrapped up clean enough at the end to where when it was over, I was like, okay, I'm fine with that.
Sweet. Right on.
Personally.
So to wrap it up, I guess I'll just run through a little bit of trivia. There's actually quite a bit of trivia on this, but I'll keep it to the salient points. One of my favorite pieces is so our main villain, Sato, the badass fucking greed over honor main villain, played by Yusaku Matsuda. This was his last film role. And
he was young.
Yeah. So Matsuda, he knew he had bladder cancer, I guess, through the whole shoot and preceding getting cast for the film. And he knew, too, his doctors were telling him, like, hey, this bladder cancer, your condition, everything, it's going to be aggravated by, you know, I mean, he has quite a few action scenes, you know, he's running, he's fucking tumbling over cars and shit, and especially
cutting his finger off.
Yeah. And the end, you know, the final salvo with Michael Douglas, but he elected to do so anyway, unbeknownst to director Ridley Scott, reportedly saying, "This way I will live forever." On November 6th, so I think this released on September 23rd, 1989. On November 6th, so like less than 6-7 weeks after the film's American premiere, Matsuda died of bladder cancer at the age of 40, and this film is dedicated. This film is dedicated to his memory. Yeah, how badass is that?
Holy shit, that's rough.
Just G'd up from the feet up. He knew he had all that shit, didn't tell anyone, and was like, yeah, fuck it. He finally told the dude, like the director at the end of like filming, like, yeah, this way I will live forever.
I wonder,
that's pretty badass.
Yeah, but I mean, I wonder if it was terminal from the get-go, or if he would have taken steps to treat it, if he could have survived it, you know?
Yeah. I would like to think that it was just terminal and that he had nothing to lose by it, because that would suck. I mean, this isn't out for any film, even if it were like a 10 out of 10, won 10 Oscars kind of movie, that still wouldn't be worth it if by choosing not to film it, you could have had another year, 2-3 years with your family, you know? Like, yeah, do that.
You mean like when Raul Julia sacrificed his life to give us the cinematic masterpiece known as Street Fighter?
God. Yeah, that's a tough one, too. He's fucking awesome. You know, it kind of like that, too. Do you know about Raul Julia, like, making that film? He said he made it for his kids. Mm-hmm. He said Raul Julia stuck out Street Fighter and gave it his all, 110%, because his kids were big fans of the Street Fighter video game, and he wanted like he knew that was going to be his last thing, so that's why he's going for it. He's going full balls to the wall in Street Fighter, which is kind of laughable.
What a legend
for the movie that it is, but I think that just speaks to his character. And then, like, similarly to this Matsuda guy, just like, I don't care if I'm in Street Fighter or, you know, whatever movie it is, I'm going to fucking give it my all and be a professional and just do my very best. It's pretty hardcore. Pretty badass.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so this one, going back to, like, how hard it is for an American crew to film in Japan. So when the crew ran even a few minutes over their allotted filming time at any given location in Japan, not only were they told to leave, a man physically walked in front of the camera and forbade them from continuing to film.
Yeah, that would make it tough. And
let's see. Yeah, there's a piece about Mats, Ken Takakura, being well known for playing Yakuza gangsters, so he's going against type. And and then so the guy who played Sato, the main bad guy, Yusaku Matsuda, he was well known for regularly playing company men, like straight man detectives too. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like a little flip-floppy.
Yeah.
I am the last one.
Oh, this one's interesting too. So the plot of Black Rain was originally supposed to be the plot for Beverly Hills Cop 2 with Eddie Murphy. Which...
Really?
Yeah, that's weird.
I've never seen any of those.
Really? That's where the you put the banana in the tailpipe? That's what that's from. I think that's from Beverly Hills Cop 1. Eddie Murphy and Judge Reinhold.
I've never seen them.
Another piece too about, so I guess Ridley Scott vowed never to shoot in Japan again due to the high cost and excessive bureaucratic wrangling that was incurred during location filming there. He's like, yeah,
I can't even imagine just the financial cost of moving of an entire production over there, let alone like the emotional burden of, I don't know how long they were there filming. That's got to be such a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. What do you think of the score in this film?
I thought it was okay. Not really super metal. Some of the songs were definitely of that era, like in the beginning. And I think it's the same one at the end, but... I'll be holding on. Kind of had some Michael McDonald vibes there. Yeah.
I guess this was coming. Ridley Scott had come off a string of financial and critical failures stemming back to Blade Runner. I guess this, and then he followed this up with Thelma and Louise, which I didn't realize he directed that in 91. Wow. I guess those two films cemented his quote unquote comeback to America.
Isn't that like a really cheesy movie? I've never seen it.
You never seen Thelma and Louise?
No.
It's actually pretty badass.
Oh, really? It's not like a cheesy, like...
No.
Late. No.
It's actually pretty dark in some spots. I think it's known for a couple things. One being, I don't want to spoil the film, but...
Yeah, I know. They drive off a cliff at the end, I guess.
Yeah. Living with those characters in the movie, and then it does have, like, an emotional impact, like, at the end, because they're, like, two women scorned and, like, been trampled on by men, and yeah, just two women scorned, and that's their final salvo, like, their final fuck you is pretty
That'll
hardcore.
show them.
Yeah.
Is that one also really rainy?
No, it's not. It actually, it's got a very desert aesthetic.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is pretty stark contrast for Ridley Scott films. But yeah, like a lot of people think of that as like Brad Pitt's breakout. He's in that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But yeah, so I can't remember how long this film is. It feels pretty long. I think it's somewhere between like an hour and 50 and 2 hours and 15 minutes. But so Ridley Scott's first cut of this was 2 hours and 40 minutes long. That would definitely...
Yeah, it was just over 2 hours.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be way too fucking long.
It did not need to be.
No. The last couple parts about, because I liked him so much. I liked Mats a lot. Ken Takakura. At the time, he was considered Japan's biggest box office star when he filmed Black Rain in '89, and he was so popular too at the time of filming that the sets would be mobbed by fans trying to get his autograph when they were filming in Japan for Black Rain, and it caused trouble as the film was on a very strict time frame. So add that to like everything else having to film over there too. But then you think of him and he seems like this kind of gentle, sensitive, unassuming type guy, and people just like losing their shit like the fucking Beatles are in town. Like that's kind of a funny juxtaposition.
Like you said, it's just one more thing that made it that much more difficult to get it done. Wow.
Yeah. Ooh. Jackie Chan turned down the role of Sato because he felt audiences didn't want to see him play a quote-unquote bad character. That would be fucking weird to think about. But I guess, too, that was before he had his breakout with American audiences. I think he broke out with Rumble in the Bronx, so that's like either 92 or 94. That was his breakout to, like, American audiences, but...
Yeah, I didn't really become aware of him until... I guess like 96, just based on where I was living at the time.
Like Rush Hour?
Jackie Chan's First Strike. I think that's the one I remember.
Oh, yeah, right.
I don't think I ever saw it, but I just remember becoming aware of it. There was a video store down the street that would do 5 movies for 5 days for $5.
Oh, yeah.
The good old days.
Yeah. Yep, I worked at a Blockbuster for a time in my youth, from the 2000 to 2002. I worked at the biggest perk of that was we used to be able to get movies before they would go out for rent, like 2 or 3 days before we could get a little taste before everyone else, and I got five free movies a week that I could.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of where, yeah, that was, like, in those days, like, I know you can't even fathom it now with, like, the availability and ubiquity of fucking films and streaming and everything now, but I remember back then I felt like I was, like, pimp shit, like, being able to fucking walk away with 5 movies after a shift, for a week. That was actually kind of, like, my formative, like, coming into becoming a movie buff was, like, because I would just, like, watch everything I could get my hands on at Blockbuster. That's where I really developed a fondness for Bull Durham. I rented that movie so many fucking times.
That is a good one.
That's just a good film.
It really is. That is such a good movie.
All right. Well, I think that... there's so much trivia for this movie. That's insane. But yeah, I think those are the most interesting pieces that I could pull out of this. But yeah, I think this is one of those films that just gets kind of lost in the shuffle of like late 80s, early 90s, like procedural cop detective kind of movies. And by virtue of it being filmed in Japan and having the storyline that it does, I feel like it kind of rises above a lot of that glut of that type of film was popular in that time frame.
Well, I certainly had never heard of it before. Seeing like the poster that you had, and even since then, I don't think I've heard anything about this movie ever. Yeah,
I mean, it. By all accounts, it was a big deal. It was a Ridley Scott film. I mean, Michael Douglas is in it. He was in a huge draw for like 20 years, and even still, you hear his name, he's got brand recognition. Sure. So yeah, it is kind of a forgotten gem, a deep cut, if you will, which is why I chose it. Yeah, so
that's a good call.
Okay, cool. So I'm back. I'm batting above 500, I think, now for exposing you to quote unquote good films.
3 for 4.
Sweet. All right. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us here at Waxing the Porpoise. This has been our review of Black Rain. Check it out if you haven't. Strong recommend from both of us. If you got any questions, comments, you can send us an email at wax@waxingtheporpoise.com. Find us on Instagram, Waxing the Porpoise, or our Twitter, @waxingtheporp. Next week, we are going to be talking about the relatively unknown gem, Near Dark, starring Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen of Pumpkinhead fame. He was also Bishop in Aliens. Have you seen Aliens?
Nope.
Oh, Jesus! All right, well, proof positive right there while we're doing this show. So yeah, that's what we'll be talking about next. Near Dark. I think that's 87, and it's available right now on Shudder and AMC Plus, I believe. So yeah, thanks for joining us again. Hope to see you next time, and take it easy.
Thanks, man.
Chase, what the fuck were you thinking about here?
All right, so that's it. Recording.